Well, anxiety is, again, dealing with threat. And threat, you have two different responses that people have. You either respond with anger or you respond with fear. And again, I use those in a very broad sense. Anxiety can range from apprehension to panic, and anger can range from irritation to rage, right? So depending upon how you assess the threat and also how you've learned to deal with threats, and that's all childhood, learning and programming, you will respond to one or the other, and then the way that you respond when you're angry or anxious also is a result of, again, of what you've learned as you grew up. Sometimes by modeling parents, sometimes through trial and error. So one person, they feel threatened and they'll get angry, and it may just be irritation because, again, positive use of anger is when you tune into it early on. And, this is bugging me, so I need to take care of this. And I do something that's constructive, that's going to take care of it without harming others or myself, right? That we would call assertive action, right? The negative form is, of course, when you get raged and you just go out, I'm going to destroy whatever it is that's threatening me, right? And the same thing with anxiety. If I'm anxious, positive anxiety, because we all get anxious, right? I got an interview coming up, I got an assignment coming up, I got a presentation at work coming up. And so that anxiety is motivation to help you prepare and make sure that I'm okay to take care of that. In fact, anger and anxiety are similar in that they're just motivation and energy, right? They energize your body and they focus your attention on whatever it is that's that need, that either the need or threat that's going on out there.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. We have a wonderful guest with me today from a sunny part of the United States of America. I'm up here in Canada. Happy to have my guest with me today. We're going to be talking about all things about like anxiety and anger and how to, overcome some of these things in our life with more than 20 years of counseling and helping people. My guest today is here to share his story as an author and as somebody who has a heart for people. And I'm really excited to have my guest with me today. Reneau, how nice to have you here, Reneau. Nice to see you.
Yes, great to be here.
Welcome. Can you let everybody know where you are in the world?
I'm just outside of Sacramento, California, sunny Sacramento. And we have a beautiful day, 96 today. So I'm enjoying the weather.
Good. Well, we're in Canada and we're in like the low 80s right now. So,
yeah.
And I'm like, but remember how far apart we are geographically.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we should be in the 80s right now. But it's warm up here too. But I would love to come visit California. It sounds like a beautiful place. What do you love about California besides family and besides all that great stuff? What's something great about California?
Well, where I'm at, it's a great location because the mountains are like 2 hours away. If I want to go to the beach, it's about 2 hours away. So just about any kind of thing you want to go to, you can go to. We have the wine country. You can go down there and drive around and visit things and have a picnic and all of that. So it's lots of stuff to do, and the weather's great. So that's why we put up with the boys down under the dome down Sacramento. So.
That's great. Sounds like there's a lot of great things about living there. It's great. Have you been to Canada?
I haven't been to Canada. Got close, but haven't actually been to. My wife's been up there, so she's been up in Vancouver. And
good.
So
that's another nice, beautiful place of Canada.
Well, actually, I have been because we went to Niagara and we went on the other side of Niagara last year. So yeah.
Well, so there you go. So you're right near my hometown. So that's wonderful. Really, really good. So we got together to talk about all things writing and being published as an author and all that great stuff. Let everybody know a little bit about your background as far as what's led up to you becoming an author. Because again, mentioning all your years of counseling and things you've done, what kind of set the stage for you to become an author?
Well, both of my parents came from farming backgrounds. So their parents had farms. My dad was in the Navy and my mom was working for the post office, but we had about a third of an acre. And so we had animals. We had rabbits and chickens and cats and dogs and my dad always liked to experiment with things. So one year we had a couple steers, and one year we had some geese, which were, that was an interesting experience with the geese. Two geese and a gander. Those things are smart. It's amazing. We had this little chicken wire thing with chicks that we had hatched, and we had a little place where they go in with a warming lamp if they needed to at night. And we came out one day, and the two geese were holding up the wire while the gander was trying to get underneath there and get the chicks. They would actually cooperate. It was amazing to watch them. So yeah, fun animals. So I was always interested in animal behavior. I trained my chickens to get up on the boxes and stuff. We grew grapes, and so the grapes were their reward. And in high school, there was a guy named Conrad Lorenz that I enjoyed reading, and he discovered or identified imprinting. So when little baby geese and stuff get born or hatch, the first thing that gives the right call note, that's the right size, they imprint on is their parent. And so they'll follow that around. And so he would do things like he would let the chicks hatch, and then he would give the call note. And so they would follow him around, and he would take them on walks and stuff. And it was, stuff like that. So just very interested in animal behavior. And as I got into college, then of course I specialized in animal behavior in what's called entheology, and got into teaching. So after I got my degree in biology, and started teaching, and did that for a few years, taught a couple years over in Japan, and came back and decided I wanted to switch over to counseling. So I went from animal behavior to human behavior. A lot of times I joke that was a step down, but
wow.
People are really good at disguising things, and they get really clever at hiding what's really going on inside. So animals are right up in your face. A dog or a cat or a bird or whatever. You know what's going on with them just by looking at them.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
So you're an author.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how this began then, as far as you becoming an author.
Well, it starts with my paper route. I had a paper route started in the 5th grade and kept that through my junior year in high school. And by the time I finished, I had I'd saved about $3,000. So I bought 15 Krugerrands, and I stuck them in a safety deposit box. And then later on, when I decided I wanted to write a book, I'd actually done like a mail order program for people with anxiety problems, and got tired of doing all of the mailing and that type of stuff. So why don't I just put all this stuff in a book that they can buy? So I put it in a book, and I sent it out, and I got about 50 rejects. About half of them said, this is just way too specialized. And the other half said, well, this is just way too generalized. And so
you introduce those people together, right? Can you two have in the same room? Yeah.
Well, the real story was I wasn't connected with a large institution. I wasn't a really well-known person, so they just didn't want to take a chance on me. So I said, okay, well, why don't I self-publish it? And so I cashed in my Krugerrands, and so my paper route buddy is what I used to publish my first book. And back then you had to actually do the layout with all the crop marks and everything. So I did all of that. Excuse me just a second.
Yeah.
And got on the radio and started talking about it, and sold 50,000 of them over the first year and a half. And so then I represented it to Warner Books, and Warner Books said, well, okay, it sells, so we'll take it.
Now that you've done all the heavy lifting, then we'll jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because publishers, there's two places where your book can get killed. First of all, it goes to, the editor, and the editor, they'll say, well, I like it. I really like this book. But then they send it over to marketing, right? And if marketing doesn't think they can sell it, then they'll stop it right there. So even if the editor likes it, so you have to please both of those. So when you do a book proposal, you have to have information in there as to, not only your background, but what's your competition? Why is this unique? And who's going to buy it? And you have to kind of basically sell it to the sales department. So
Reneau, that's interesting, because there's authors that listen to this podcast, and what you just talked about right there might be a new author listening, and they're like, wait a minute, can you go a little deeper on that? Because I haven't experienced this yet.
Right.
And I'd love to know a little bit more about that. That's unique.
Well, a a book proposal has several different sections. You have your introduction, which says how great this book is, and then within that you say who's going to buy it. You talk a little bit about here are some other books that are out that are like it. This is how this one's different. Here's the niche that it's going to go into. Mm-hmm. Then you have a section where you do usually 1 or 2 chapters and an outline. And then you have a section that gives your background, your history, if you've got other things written or if you've done media performances or interviews like this one, you list a lot of that type of stuff. Okay. So people know that you're able to go on and you're willing to go on to media and you have some experience in that area. And that's what how you put a book proposal together. The other thing is it's really important to have an agent. As I was told when I first started, is if you have a good agent, they're your gatekeepers for the publishers. And a lot of publishers don't like cold people that just send things to them cold. They rely on the agents. They develop relationships and they trust this person's judgment. Well, this is well written. It's probably got a good market, so I'll take a look at it.
So an agent becomes like a filter then.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's like your GP, in medicine. They're the gatekeeper, right? So the agents are kind of the gatekeeper for the publishers. And if you've got a good agent, you'll get the A contract. And if you got a, mediocre agent, you'll get the B contract. Yeah. And if you go by yourself and you happen to get in, you'll get the C contract unless you really know what you're doing. Because the way the game works is they want all the rights. They want everything. And so if you've got a good agent or if you know what you're doing, then you'll say, well, no, I don't want to give you world rights. I will give you North American rights. Or, if you've got something that has movie potential, then you may want to hold that back. If you think you have foreign, like in my current contracts, I'll hold back a foreign translation because I have some of those already. And so I just go back to them and I'll submit that to them and say, hey, I got a new book. Take a look at this one. And so like for German or Spanish, then I kind of cut out their agent and I go directly to my contacts for those.
So what about the world of audiobooks? Have you dipped your toe there as well?
Just dipped into it. And okay. I had an agent that with my new book, she had contacts with Nightingale Conant. And so she basically sold the audiobooks for my first 2 books, actually my first 3 books, and for the upcoming book to them. And so we got a contract with them, and they're a pretty good outfit to work with. They have a pretty generous royalty rate. And then they actually did all the recording. They had their voice do it, and then they put it up on Audible. And the first 2 have actually just come out on it. So
beautiful. Yeah, well, so we'll definitely have links to all that in the show notes because people are, I know for myself when I'm working or I'm doing something, right. It's nice to have a book in the background. And you feel like you're accomplishing 2 things at once. You're learning something and getting an activity done at the same time. So I enjoy them. I think they're great. So that's really, really good.
Yeah, my son was doing long haul truck driving, and he was doing a lot of books and stuff as he was driving across the country, going different places.
Yeah, I love music, but sometimes music's like candy, and you have to a little less candy and a little bit more knowledge. So I love that as an option. That's great.
Right.
So you mentioned multiple books. Reneau, tell me, are all your books in the same genre, the same theme or topic, or are they various?
Well, they're the same genre. They're all self-help books, or that category, self-improvement, self-help. Okay. And the first one that's really sold the most was Anxiety, Phobias, and Panic. And that's all about anxiety disorders. And it's a step-by-step program. And it came out of my mail order program. And then I just basically put it into the book. And it's just a series of lessons on all the things you need to do. Then I did a follow-up to that because after I wrote it and I edited it out for a bunch of years and I'd been working with people, I said, there is another step for what is called long-term recovery or relapse prevention. And so I wrote a book with following 3 people with different types of anxiety disorders and just following them through the steps and how do they get to that long-term recovery or relapse prevention. And, sometimes you have to deal with issues that are core issues. Maybe you've come from a childhood, like in one of the people in the book, they had abusive parents. And so they kind of got the message that the world is dangerous. And so even though they got their symptoms under control, they still had that programming that the world is dangerous. And so when they would get into conflict situations, that would trigger all the old stuff again and would kick it back up. So managing that was important. Another theme that I do in all my books is the idea that emotions are just messages. They're messages about business you need to take care of. And people with anxiety disorders, in the first book and the second book, they need to keep short accounts because it's kind of like a house where the wiring's not quite up to code. That's their nervous system. Mm-hmm. And so when something's going on, they're having stress, it just basically the circuit breakers go off. In fact, that usually is what kicked off their initial panic attacks as they were in a stressful situation. So part of their life lesson is to learn that when I start to feel anxious or get some symptoms coming up, I need to go through the checklist. Okay, how's my partner doing? How's my relationship with my partner going? How are the kids doing? How is work doing? How are my life goals running along? How are my friendships? And always they'll come upon one area and they'll say, well, this happened, but it wasn't that big a deal. Because, their personality is they tend to ignore stuff, especially when there's boundary issues or, relationship issues. And so the message is, well, it is a big deal because your body's telling you it's a big deal. So deal with it. Come up with a plan to how you're going to resolve that conflict or take care of that need or whatever it is, or maybe pursue that life goal that you've been, neglecting. And that's true for all emotions. They're just messages that you got something going on inside of you, some need or want, or some threat that you need to deal with. And the second book was anger. It's very much similar, Okay.
So I did a little bit of research as well before we hit record. What would you, I've kind of have my answer here, so I'm interested to hear your response to this. What would you say is the opposite of anxiety then?
Well, anxiety is, again, dealing with threat. And threat, you have two different responses that people have. You either respond with anger or you respond with fear. And again, I use those in a very broad sense. Anxiety can range from apprehension to panic, and anger can range from irritation to rage, right? So depending upon how you assess the threat and also how you've learned to deal with threats, and that's all childhood, learning and programming, you will respond to one or the other. And then the way that you respond when you're angry or anxious also is a result of, again, of what you've learned as you grew up. Sometimes by modeling parents, sometimes through trial and error. That's a very broad range of how people learn how to deal with their emotions. It's usually a combination of all that stuff, the messages from society, the movies and music they watch, the people they hang around with, their social structure, all that type of stuff. So one person, they feel threatened and they'll get angry, and it may just be irritation because, again, positive use of anger is when you tune into it early on. And, this is bugging me, so I need to take care of this. And I do something that's constructive, that's going to take care of it without harming others or myself, right? That we would call assertive action, right? The negative form is, of course, when you get raged and you just go out, I'm going to destroy whatever it is that's threatening me, right? The same thing with anxiety. If I'm anxious, positive anxiety, because we all get anxious, right? I got an interview coming up, I got an assignment coming up, I got a presentation at work coming up. And so that anxiety is motivation to help you prepare and make sure that I'm okay to take care of that. In fact, anger and anxiety are similar in that they're just motivation and energy, right? They energize your body and they focus your attention on whatever it is that's either the need or threat that's going on out there.
So living a life with zero anxiety and zero fear or anger is not something that's probably the best for us. We do need a little bit of that in our lives.
Well, we call that a computer, right? So
yeah, there you go. Exactly right.
No, I mean, emotions are what make us human. And the new book's interesting because I did a lot of research on what's called affective neurobiology. And we have these 7 circuits that we share with animals. And they're there basically to help us, drive us to take care of needs and wants, but they also are what cause us to bond with people. So, for example, there's 2 fear circuits. One is danger, and the other one is separation anxiety. And you see that with all kinds of babies, right? They get separated, whether we're talking about a puppy or a kitten or we're talking about a human baby. They get separated from their caregivers and they get, you have to distress. There's a complementary circuit called the caring circuit that we also have. And those two kind of work together to bond the parent and the child, but also what we call love, a higher cognitive emotion, because that's an emotion that emerges as we come up with beliefs about what's important, what's not important, who am I, what are other people like? And so love and love relationships partly are the result of that bond of the separation anxiety. I'm sad when you're away. I'm happy when you're here, and I have that caring, going on. It's interesting to watch kids. I've got a 2.5-year-old great granddaughter that we watch on Mondays and Tuesdays, and we take her out and take her to the park and playgrounds and stuff. And watching her and the other little kids, when some kid falls down or distressed, you can see that circuit kick in. They all get all very concerned,
Yeah, as you're saying that, I can picture that for sure.
Yeah. It's they're just wiring. It's kind of like affects. The simplest ones are like hunger and thirst. When you're really hungry or thirsty, it focuses your attention. Your senses start to pay attention to aromas and things. Or you start seeking that water. And the same thing with your emotions. They're those drives inside of us that cause us to want to form relationships. One of the fun ones is something called seeking, and it's the circuit that drives young mammals to go out and explore their environment. So little baby, right? They're looking at everything. They're touching everything. They're looking at everything, and that's basically how mammals find resources, both positive things and threats. And as an adult, it's what drives you to want to learn things. When you go to a new environment, you start checking things out. And again, it's just an urge to understand and to seek out what's going on in your environment. And it's an actual circuit inside the brain. So
that's interesting, because I can remember when my children would be small and we'd go to a store and there'd be like breakables in the store. Yeah. I know, as a dad, I'd be like, look with your eyes, not with your hands. Not with your hands, right? And that'd be they want to touch everything, right? So that explains that circuit for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But we get into hobbies, we want to learn things. We watch something on TV that's interesting. It's that same circuit that's kind of driving that behavior. So, yeah.
It's amazing. Okay, so we've talked about, I think, the two of the books you've written. What was the third one?
Well, there's the Anxiety, Phobias, Panic.
Okay,
there's the Anger, Taming the Beast. Yep. And this new one that's coming out is Why You Feel the Way You Do.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, we have been with the circuits and stuff.
Good.
Yeah, because that's where I started. I start talking about what neuroscience has found out, and then I go from there to talking about some of the conditioned response stuff, some of the what we call emotional triggers that people have, why they form, how to calm them down. Then I move into an area that I call core responses or core response patterns. It's not something, it's kind of my own term, although there are some classic ones that are out there. Learned helplessness is a core response pattern. Learned helplessness is where a person learns they can't succeed. Now, with animals, you see it. Like you put an animal, like a dog, in a situation, you give them electric shocks, and they can't escape from them. Pretty soon they give up trying to escape. Now you can put them into a new situation where they could easily escape, and they won't even try. Interestingly enough, though, if you show them how to escape, then they will start. And of course, when they're in learned helplessness, they show all the cortical, indicators and stuff of depression. And the same thing with people. You find people in situations whether it's a family or a culture or country or whatever, where they're beat down, they have no possibility of improving themselves. Prisoners of war, you see that with them. They just kind of become very numb and they quit trying. Right. And I know with kids, like in foster cares and stuff, who've come out of abusive relationships, that's something you see with them a lot of times. And so they just don't even try. They've learned that you can't succeed, and that's their core response pattern. It's interesting with kids, if you can help them have success experiences, then that's how you get them out of it. In fact, it's interesting with adults that have come out of really negative backgrounds. I saw a long-term study a long time ago, and it identified two different things that seemed to help them come out of that. One was they had a success experience somewhere. It might have been they were successful at sport. They might have had a subject at school that they were successful at. But something that gave them the idea, well, I can be successful at least in some things, right? And the second thing is they married or they had a relationship as an adult with somebody who came from a relatively healthy background. And that allowed them then to model off of that person healthy behaviors. Unfortunately, people from dysfunctional backgrounds usually hook up with somebody from a dysfunctional background. And so just the pattern just keeps repeating. So
when we're talking, like I'm hearing lots of stuff about connection with community, connection with others, and how others help you along the way of your life. And then I just think of like the opposite of that would be like thinking of in a prison when you are put in isolation and that human element is removed from you, and that's a form of punishment.
Right.
You know, a lot of people live a life of, being elusive and not letting people in, and then allowing anxiety and fear and anger to kind of build up in them. And it's just the power of community and having somebody around you to kind of help break some of that up. I think that's really powerful.
Well, in the last section of the new book, I talk about what's called positive psychology. Newspapers like to call it the science of happiness. But since 2000, there's been an increasing amount of research into what makes people happy. You know, what are the positive things? Number one is relationship. Having positive, healthy relationships. That's one of the things that I kept coming upon in young people with social media, because it's such an empty form of relationship. There's no real connection. Now, social media, Facebook, those types of things can be very useful if you're connecting with family or friends that you have an actual relationship with. But unfortunately, the way so many kids use it is it's a very artificial, carefully curated pictures and images. In fact, I kept coming up with the term fear of missing out. And that's a new thing that they're finding with a lot of young people, is they have this fear of missing out because they see this wonderful world that everybody else is having. And gee, I'm just sitting here not having anything that's fun.
Yeah.
So, and not only that, but I know I was at a college and they actually had to teach a lot of the kids how to do interviews and stuff, and how to talk, and how to, if you go out to lunch or something, how can you be social? Because they didn't have those skills, because kids nowadays oftentimes are so isolated or are spending so much time online, they never develop the interaction skills that you really need for a good communication. In fact, it's sad when you go out to the restaurant, you see a family, the adults, they got their device that they're into, the kids have got their device they're into, and nobody's talking. There's no interaction. It's just everybody's kind of plugged into their little device. Yeah,
I remember seeing two students sitting side by side. Yeah. They're both on their phones. I'm like, hey, you guys, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're talking to each other.
Yeah, they're texting back.
And they're right, like, shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah,
like they're right beside you.
Yeah. I've seen that with a group of teenagers. They're all on their phones texting because, again, they don't know how to talk face to face. And that's sad, because we are designed on a very basic organic level for interaction, human interaction. Yes. And when we don't get that, we get a little bit twisted. It's an important component for mental health. The other thing that you see nowadays that people miss out on is silence, or alone time, or time where they're unplugged from their devices. Yes. With my anxiety clients, the first thing I always told them, even before internet stuff came up, quit watching TV news. There's nothing good that you're going to get out of it. You don't get a lot of news. You get a little headline with a whole lot of dramatic pictures and, verbiage. Nowadays, I tell people, find yourself a news aggregate site where you can go kind of look at the headlines. You can click on things you're interested in, actually read something a little bit more in depth, spend 15, 30 minutes to do that, and then go on with your day. That way you can stay informed. You actually have some real information, but you're not getting into all of that sensational stuff. And if you like talk shows, political talk shows or whatever, that's fine, but limit how much time you spend on it. Spend an hour or two a day and then go on and do other stuff. If you're constantly all day long, whether it's left or right, get in your head, just, oh, this is terrible. Look at this crisis. Oh my gosh. then yeah, you're going to be anxious.
So move
or angry. Right?
Yeah. So move from that passenger seat in your life to the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Take control of what you're feeding yourself and,
Yeah.
be a little bit filter for yourself, right? To help avoid some of that anxiety or feeding that anxiety in life.
Or anger, because they're the flip side of the coin, right? Again, depending upon how you're wired and what you learned as you grew up, how to manage threats and things in your life. And I think that's the biggest problem in our culture today is we are so polarized because we get one perspective. We are not teaching our children how to think. I mean, there's a lot of lip service given to, critical thinking, but in actuality, I find a lot of young people really don't have very good critical skills. I remember listening to one example of some interns that went out, and the manager wanted them to set up this display, and kids can't do it because there's no electricity there. The thought of, well, you go find an extension cord and bring it over. That kind of, problem solving just is absent for a lot of our young people now. So they don't know how to solve problems and think critically or look at information and say, what is the source of this information? Does this actually even sound reasonable? It's like teaching math. They get some answer. Well, let's see, this is 2 million%. And I would say, is that a reasonable answer?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. That's what the computer says. That's what my calculator said. So,
yeah.
Yeah, it's a lost art nowadays. And I think a lot of it has to do with we spend so much time in entertainment. We don't have hobbies. We don't do interactive things. We just passively consume images, and it's constantly going into our mind, and we don't take time to digest stuff, to have quiet time.
That whole thing about being a well-rounded person.
Oh, yeah.
And all that is lacking, I think, in a lot of people's lives right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's, and unfortunately, so many people don't even realize, it's kind of like a drug addict. You don't realize what you're doing. You get so used to just coming home, turning on the TV and sitting there for 4 hours, going to bed, getting up and doing whatever you need to do during the day to work, coming home, plugging in again. And there's nothing besides that going on. And yeah, it pacifies you like a drug, but certainly it takes a toll on your relationships and just your mental health and also your physical health.
That's great, Reneau. Is there anything you can share with us near the end here as far as people that are either themselves dealing with anxiety or there's family members dealing with anxiety? Doctors are quick to give you a prescription for that. Right. But there's got to be a better answer, Reneau. What would you give us as some advice as we're closing off here in a moment about just life with anxiety and where do we go?
There's a lot of stuff that you can do. I mean, the first book has a whole program on stepping you through learning some skills for reducing the level of just your physical anxiety, some self-talk skills, working with some of the belief systems, perfectionism, excessive need for approval, things like that often feed into it. And then ways to go out and actually start engaging in the world again if you are limited. Now, let me say just a quick word about medication is there are times when it has a very important role. Sometimes if a person is just barely hanging on, it can stabilize them to the point where now they can learn the tools. It's not the long-term in answer, right?
Good. Yeah.
And likewise, if you just have problems with airplanes and you take an airplane once every 2 years, taking a Xanax before you get on the airplane is fine, If it's something you got to do every few weeks or so, then probably you want to learn how to desensitize to that. Desensitization works. The anxiety tools work very well. You just have to go through them in a very systematic way to learn how to use them.
That's great. Yeah, and I love that point. And if there's something that causes you anxiety and it's an optional thing in your life, then maybe that's something you don't need to do quite as often. So if you can't speak in public on a big stage, maybe that you're not going to be a professional speaker.
Yeah.
That might reduce some of that anxiety right there. So little things like that, I think, too.
Although there was a guy I worked with a long time ago, and he had fear of public speaking, so he joined Toastmasters.
There you go.
And got so good at, because that's what they're all about, is desensitizing to that, right? He got so good at it, he started making a living at doing speeches.
It's amazing, right?
So you can literally desensitize to anything if you go about it in a systematic way. You just look at the things that people get used to around the world, and it's possible. But like I said, you need to get the relaxation and other skills for managing the symptoms, work with the self-talk that goes on, all the negative self-talk that's associated with it, work with some of the personality stuff, and then just practice it in a systematic way.
And remove some of those triggers that don't help ease anxiety, but fuel it. Like you're talking about the news and all that other stuff and the noise.
Right.
Give yourself some quiet space, and all that works in your favor as well.
Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle. You know, one of the things about that I learned early on is that different people have different things that work best for them. So if there's 10 things a person can do, I present all 10, and they pick out the 6 things that work for them out of those 10. And then the others, well, that doesn't work so much for me. So that's okay. Let that one go. These tools are working really well for you, so use them. And that's essentially what I did in the first book, is I just present a wide variety of tools and options, and people can go through, and as they work with them, they find, well, these work really well for me. These are not really me. So, yeah.
Amazing, Reneau. Thank you so much for taking time today. What's the best way for people to reach out to you, to connect with you, find the books? What's the best way to do that?
Well, my website is the easiest thing, since my name is hard to remember, and that's why emotions, WHY, so whyemotions.com. That's very easy to remember. And links to my YouTube videos. I've got YouTube videos on a lot of this stuff, as well as some things there, freebies, downloads, some relaxation response MP3s and things of that nature.
Excellent. Thank you so much for making time today. Continued success for you in the future for writing and helping people. Really appreciate you spending time with us today.
Well, it's been a lot of fun, so thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Please check out the show notes for links and everything to Reneau's great resources. And thank you so much for spending time with us. Hey guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Jump over to livingthenextchapter.com, our website, and you will see a spot where you can leave a voice message. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to hear from you. So if you want your voice on this podcast, yes, that's possible. Go to livingthenextchapter.com. Click the little microphone icon. Leave a voice message. We'll insert your message into the podcast. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell us your favorite guest. Maybe there's a guest we should have on the podcast. Maybe you should be our next guest. Leave us a message. livingthenextchapter.com. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please share this podcast episode with one person. That's all we're asking. Meet you over there at livingthenextchapter.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Love to hear from you. Till the next episode. It's coming up right away. Be sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Thank you for supporting our guests. Have a great day.